Forever. Dog.
Hello, and welcome to Outgrown, where we have guests on to discuss something from popular culture that they used to profoundly identify with and once thought would define them forever, but then eventually outgrew. My name is Julia Vickerman.
And I'm Tom Scharpling. How are you doing, Julia?
I'm doing very good. How are you doing?
I'm good. This is the first episode of the new year.
It sure is.
It's very exciting.
I'm just going to go ahead. I'm weirdly nervous about today.
You are.
I'm nervous to interview a friend of ours.
Yes.
Which doesn't make any sense.
I know, but sometimes that's the scariest stuff.
Well, today we have on the show former actor and current space marine working for SpaceX, Taran Smith.
Hi there.
Hey.
Hi, Taran.
Thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. So nice to see you guys.
Yeah. Taran, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about outgrowing home improvement.
You have usually guests come on, they talk about something that was just something they watched or listened to, but you have a slightly different relationship to the thing you want to talk about. And that is because you were on Home Improvement.
So for those who don't know, Home Improvement is an American sitcom television series starring and based on the stand-up comedy of Tim Allen. The series was created by Matt Williams, Carmen Finestra, and David McFadzean. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
David
Same people
McFadzean.
who created Roseanne and The Cosby Show.
Really?
And a few others.
Oh, cool.
Yikes.
Yeah, they had a strange run there of picking celebrities.
Roseanne.
Changed over the years.
They had a type for sure.
Yeah.
It originally aired on ABC from September 17th, 1991 to May 25th, 1999, with a total of 204 half-hour episodes spanning 8 seasons. And it was one of the most watched sitcoms in the United States for almost the entire decade of the 90s. That's pretty wild. And you played Mark, the youngest son.
Yep, from age 7 to 15 for me.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, the screen test was my 7th birthday, so
Wow.
a hell of a birthday present there.
Wow. So when you started auditioning, you were 6.
Yeah, there was like 7 auditions total, so on my birthday was the final one.
That's so crazy.
So to set the whole thing, you were living, where did you grow up?
I grew up actually on a boat in San Francisco.
Okay.
And I had an older sister, 7 years older, and my mom, who was originally from Los Angeles and still had a little bit of kind of connections to the LA Hollywood industry, ended up putting my sister into sort of the local child acting scene in San Francisco. So they had some commercials and a lot of print work that was going on up there. She got an agent for her. And then when I was born, they just put me into the same agency. So I actually started working. My first job was when I was 6 months old.
Doing what?
I was on the cover of Baby News catalog, just chewing on some blocks.
Baby News catalog.
Yeah.
What was the Baby News?
Big breaking baby news.
Yeah.
In 1984.
The baby news.
I did a few different commercials, starting I did a Gala wine commercial and an Enterprise rental car commercial.
But you did a wine commercial as a kid?
Yeah, they allowed that.
Baby
it was like
wine.
a wedding.
Baby
Was
wine?
it baby wine?
Exactly.
It was a wedding scene, and my mom always tells a story about they put me in a little white tuxedo and then told me to stay there for a while they set up a thing, and it's like you're putting an infant or a toddler in a
white tuxedo.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, you'd find that type of stuff all the time with people. You're working with people who have no idea about kids,
Right.
and are just expecting you to act like an adult when you're 2.
Yeah. So your sister must have enjoyed acting.
Yeah, she was more on the modeling side. She was a little bit more shy when it came to the acting, but she really enjoyed modeling, and she did it throughout her childhood. She eventually went to Japan for 6 weeks when she was 15 or 16. But once she got into the adult modeling world, she backed out of it. She didn't really like it.
Okay.
And followed more of a academic career.
Okay. Well, so I was going to ask, what type of kid were you before you started doing all this stuff? But you started very, very little.
For those 5 months. For 5 months, what kind of kid were you?
Yeah, what were you into?
Yeah.
Extremely gregarious.
Blocks and wine. What made your family even like, why were they even familiar with this type of thing?
It started just sort of as like a little hobby. Like, it was occasionally we would go taken out of school and go on an audition in like San Francisco proper. And my parents had a little routine. We usually like go visit FAO Schwartz after an audition just to make it fun. But it was always a sort of a hobby. And after I did a PSA for abused children when I was 6, I had to play an abused child. The director told my mom, she's like, you should really get him an LA agent, and recommended Judy Savage, who was known for representing kids at the time. And I had a grandmother in LA, so it was really easy for us to just drive down and have a place to stay. And so after signing up with Judy, the third audition I went on was Home Improvement.
Wow.
In LA. We just happened to start up in the middle of pilot season. We didn't know what that was, and that's not really a thing anymore. But it used to be like January, February was when they started casting for all the pilots, and that's just happened when we came to LA.
Cool.
Yeah, that's interesting because the whole pilot season thing for kids, a lot of the time, the whole family uproots and goes and stays at like that extended. The Oakwood
apartments,
like you're just like the whole family ends up in like some kind of oversized apartment basically while the parents are taking their kids out for auditions all day long. But you at least had a little more grounded experience because you had your grandmother here.
Yeah, I was already used to coming down here for holidays and things like that. So we actually, for the first 2 years of the show, we just lived in my grandma's house.
Okay.
Oh, cool. What type of things you getting at FAO Schwartz?
I remember they had that big piano from Big.
Yeah.
There. That's the most memory I have there.
Sure. Well, I would hope you got to pull the trigger on something after this Home Improvement thing came together. Like you get anything you want in the store. So in terms of auditioning, acting, how did you feel about that? Was it something that was exciting to you? Were you kind of just going along with it? What was your relation to that?
I think I always enjoyed it. It wasn't ever something that I, was in a state of like wanting to do and not doing it. It's just I was always doing it, but I definitely enjoyed it. And that was one of the things that I think helped, was that I was able to, go into a room with strangers and not get shy and be, be talkative and be able to, follow direction and do what they wanted without my parents in the room, and that's it's a big thing for young kids. Like a lot of times they just, without a parent in the room, they just can't.
So they just shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you were able to do that. Is that just something that that's just in you? Or was it like you were just
I was trained from 6 months? I'm not sure.
But were you the type of kid you were? Were you just like a fun, like, were you like an extroverted kid? And
I think so, definitely. I mean, I don't remember exactly what I did, but I remember I came out of one of the auditions for Home Improvement and told my mom that I made everybody laugh in there. And she was like, "Oh, what did you do?" But yeah, I mean, it was always sort of a fun experience. Just being able to try different things and I really enjoyed the process of working on a set. I remember we did an Enterprise rental car commercial for like 3 days, and my mom tells a story that at the end I told her I wish I could just do this forever. Aww. And I ended up doing it. It was always always a fun thing for me. But I think really a lot of it just comes down to being in the right place at the right time and having sort of fitting what the director / producers had in their mind. I mean, actually for me, it was really a flip of the coin, because at the end it came down to me and one other kid for the Mark Taylor role. A kid I ended up hanging out with later named Ross Mallinger, and they told us that it was down to these two kids. I was blonde, he was dark haired, and depending on which mom they went with, they were going to pick one or the other. And they went with a blonde mom originally, Frances Fisher. So we started shooting the pilot. And about halfway through the rehearsal, they ended up replacing her with Patricia Richardson. And then now they had 2 dark-haired parents with 3 blonde children. And we're all like, they're like, no, we're happy with our choice. It's fine. Like, we're not. But I mean, it really was just sort of a toss-up at that point.
Do you know why they weren't why she wasn't meshing with the show, or
the chemistry was a little strained between her and Tim, and she was very intense. And I remember we had a small little sample audience that was watched a run through before we brought the cameras in. That was ended up being kind of standard on Wednesdays. We would like round up people from Universal Studios and bring them down right onto the set. And in a pilot episode, there's a line where Tim wants to rewire the dishwasher because it's not powerful enough, and the mom doesn't want him to. She's about to leave the house, and she says, "And remember, Tim, don't touch the dishwasher." She said it, I think, like, "Don't touch the dishwasher."
uh-huh.
So then when she leaves and Tim goes to touch the dishwasher, the audience was worried. They were like, "Oh," they heard a gasp.
Yeah.
Of like,
like she's gonna kill him.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So when they brought Patricia, like there was just a much better chemistry with and she had her own kid. She had just given birth to twins, and she had one older kid who was about my age, and she really brought a lot more of a realistic mom
energy
to her, and she fought throughout the whole show to keep the show more realistic, and would tell the writers, a mother would never say this, and like get them to change it.
Did you agree with a lot of her notes on that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we weren't really involved. Like they'd do a run through of the script on Monday, and then the kids would go to school usually, and they would, continue to discuss the script. And the original creators only did the first couple seasons, and then they moved on, and they brought in a whole nother group of writer/producers. And those guys, very few of them had kids, and the show kind of started to go in a different direction, at least the scripts we would get on Monday. And it was really Pat, the mom, who fought the good fight to make it more realistic, because they would just, oftentimes they would just be like something that was very out of character just to sell a joke, just to set up a joke. And it's like, wait, this is not what the characters are about. And I think Tim was overall maybe a bit worried about being a tyrant, because like the same creators had just created Roseanne, and Roseanne took over the show and fired the creators, fired everybody. Actually, all our camera crew had been fired at like in one day from Roseanne and came over to our class. So Tim was always, I think, more hands off with that, not wanting to be tyrannical, which meant that it was a lot more on Pat to push. And so that's one of the reasons why the show ended up eventually ending, was she was just tired of it, and of having to fight to make it realistic all the time, and not getting, Tim was getting far more money than she was, and that was her actual like way of stopping. It was like, she said she'll do a night season if she get paid the same amount as Tim. And knowing they wouldn't do it.
Suddenly they're like, So somebody says from the Enterprise commercial, you should get an LA agent. You get the LA agent. You do the initial audition for Home Improvement. Was it one of those giant casting calls with just a room full of 100 kids? Yeah, they had apparently like over 700 kids for the 3 roles, going from Florida, from Texas, from LA. And so over the process of 7 auditions, we whittled that down to, I think there was just 4 of us going into the screen test there. So you said 7 screen tests in total? Like 7 auditions?
7 auditions,
7 auditions. Yeah. So you just felt, what was that feeling like? You're getting like, wow, we're still going over and over and over.
Yeah, like, I mean, it was just like, always try to not get your hopes up. Always just think, okay, it's, my parents would tell me it's selection, not rejection. That was, a way to like not get too, saddened by anything. But of course, each time they call you back, it's you're getting a little closer.
Well, that's human nature. You can't help but start to believe. Yeah.
There was one point where we didn't hear anything for a while. We thought it was over. And then I think my mom had to she had a pager at the time and had to go find a payphone to answer a page and find out that it was, the one more audition, keep going back down.
And you were friends with the kid you were up against.
I ended up meeting him later, and I think we were in like an acting class or something together. So he went on to do Sleepless in Seattle.
Okay.
He was Tom
he was the kid in that. Okay.
And he did a couple other movies. So
cool.
He wasn't. Yeah. We stayed in touch for a little while.
So then you get the thing. Hey, congratulations, you got the job. the whole family packs up and goes to LA, or was it in increments? Or
Yeah, so we would do 25 episodes a year. Well, each episode was a week long, so really only half the year. And they would kind of spread it out, so we do like 2 weeks on, 1 week off, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or 2 weeks off. Help the writers, give them time to catch up, and overall like 9 months of shooting, and with sort of like an offset summer break. And my sister was in high school at the time and was not wanting to uproot her life in Marin County. That's where we lived in San Francisco. And so originally it was just my mom coming down with me, kind of splitting up the family a little bit. Then we'd go back up to San Francisco. I would go to regular school up there, and we would just kind of phase back and forth. So it wasn't until, I don't know, like third year, we ended up getting an apartment in Burbank, and still going back and forth. And then eventually, when I was like 11 or 12, we moved more permanently. We got a house in the valley, but by that time my sister was 18 and was going to college.
Okay.
So.
And so what would you do then on the summer breaks?
We'll finish the school year. So we would be off from like April to August or something like that. So I would have a little bit more time in school.
Would you go to a physical school?
I did most of the time. Originally up in San Francisco, and then for junior high, I went through like a accredited homeschool based out of Ojai, California, and they just let the set teachers just go with it and make their own curriculum. And I ended up basically just doing all high school work during that time, so I got to count those 2 years as high school, and was able to graduate at 15.
Cool.
I eventually started going to a local school for 2 years here in LA. But it had to be a private school because the public schools just would not interface with the set teachers. And that was always a little bit of a tricky thing because, we were at the mercy of the teachers being properly communicating to my set teachers of what's going to be on the test and things like that. Sometimes that communication broke down. But it also was hard because I wouldn't be at school very often, even during the weeks off. Oftentimes I was doing other events or traveling or, just barely there. And so I had no idea who was dating who or any of that. I remember like complaining about some girl in my math class to someone and realizing way later that, that was her boyfriend. No wonder he didn't like me after that. Oops.
It's such a strange thing when you're a kid and the idea of like what a family is, like, what your actual family is. But now you have this pretend family. What did that feel like to have to go, be a kid in another family that's just, they're not your family, and you're kind of, you're living together for a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, the other two brothers were, in a lot of ways like my older brothers in as far as in real life, just because of how much time we spent together. And they were both the same age, 3 years older than me, so it was a little difficult sometimes because I would obviously be the kind of the odd man out there, but
I didn't realize they were the same age. That's funny.
Yeah,
I always thought
Jonathan's
Zachary
the
Tybrand
oldest, actually, by like a month. Yeah,
Because
just a lot smaller. So they made him the middle kid.
I see.
Yeah, because your character was pretty. They were like trying to blow you up and stuff. It just seemed like.
Yeah, we went back and watched a few episodes of the show, and like they're not particularly nice to you.
No, I mean that was the whole trope for the first like 5 years or so, was that they were bullying me.
Yeah, that's
but then I
kind of
grew
crummy.
bigger than them,
right?
And then we were like,
that's right. Yeah, suddenly.
So the season like 6 or so, they really kind of floundered with what my character was, and then they tried to add something in season 7 by making me gothic.
Well,
we're definitely going to talk about that.
I can't.
Did you realize how big the show was going to be? Did anyone kind of foresee how big it was going to be?
Not in the beginning, except we did hear when they did a live audience for the pilot. They said that they had the longest laugh that they had ever recorded for a sitcom.
What was the joke?
I have no idea.
Was it "Don't touch the dish"?
I do not remember. But so there was a little bit of hint there. What's funny is my my dad my mom was also working as a strip supervisor off and on. So she kind of got the biggest movie of her career right at the same time that they shot the pilot. She was on the Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Oh, wow.
So my dad was the one that actually was like the, stage mom for me during the pilot, and was like trying to read her the script. And, there's all these like fart jokes and talking about butt cracks and things. And
yeah.
she's like, oh my God, what did we get into? And
Uh-huh.
she's like, no, you got to see Tim do this. It works. I promise. Like, but just seeing it on paper, it seemed like a really strange show.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we quickly, they put us in a really good time slot. We were between, Full House and Roseanne on Tuesdays, I think, or Wednesdays, one of those. And we started off like, in the top 5 in the first year, and then getting to number 1 for most of it. Number 1 in America. Baywatch was always number 1 in the world.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
You can
it's
imagine why.
hard to beat Baywatch.
Yeah.
But then Pamela Anderson came on Home Improvement.
Yeah. She did her first acting career was started on Home Improvement.
Oh, wow, that's
she did
wild.
Playboy, and then started on Home Improvement. So for the first 2
Interesting.
years.
Was she nice? Did you like her?
Yeah, she was very sweet. And it was, it was hard to see her go through all the stuff she went through at post Home Improvement. She came back, I think, on the last season, and I was like, oh, things have been rough. But I saw her years later at an event for PETA, and all that like light was back. It was really nice to see her.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So-
she seems like a really cool person.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So when you were saying the show started off successful, it wasn't like a grower of a show, or what did that feel like? Because this is so outside your family and your frame of reference, to suddenly our 7-year-old is on millions of people are watching you act. What was your perception of that in terms of like the magnitude of it? Were you aware that it's just like, 20-something million people are watching this every week?
I mean, I was in the abstract. It was not something you really could wrap your head around, especially at that age. I definitely had a hard time in the beginning just with fans, and not in a bad way, but just like not understanding, like, especially like when they asked for my autograph, like, why would they want me to sign my name on something? And at first it was a little off-putting, being recognized and stuff. But then, my parents really explained, it's like, okay, with just a little bit of your energy, you can create so much joy for these people. Just focus on that and enjoy it. And once that clicked in, then it made a lot more sense of just interacting with someone in a very simple way can be, very profound for them. Even though, for me, it's just a job. I mean, I always tell people, like, your plumber, your teacher, your electrician, way more important to you than the dancing monkeys in the box. But no one wants to hear that.
I mean, how did it like change your family dynamic?
I mean, in a way, it sort of split up the family, but I mean, physically, but it also made us like grow fonder. Absence made so my sister and I have always gotten along, but we also were somewhat separated for a lot of that. And with my parents, they've been together now over 50 years, and it's just, one more chapter in their lives of one person doing a job while the other person develops something, back and forth. My dad was able to develop a whole a new company selling desalinization pumps for boats, take seawater and make it fresh so you can drink it. And so he was able to take time off of his job to develop that. And so I mean, it was very good for the family overall, but definitely put some strain on their relationship for sure.
Yeah, your family's very nice.
I know, you got to meet my parents.
You clearly you're a smart person, and you had interests well outside of acting and show business, based on what your father is also doing. He's doing desalinization. And were these interests, how did you kind of balance the two things? Because you're not just in this, like, I'm going to be an actor is the only thing I'm interested in. Or you tell me, at that point, were you interested in science and things like that?
Definitely. I mean, even before the show, I remember I think I was 4 years old when my dad gave me my first Makita drill, a cordless drill, and he's a born engineer. He built his own boat. He built his own plane. He's still flying the plane that he built around the same time I was born.
Wow.
So I grew up with learning from him, working on his plane, flying planes, and that was always something that was part of my life of using tools and creating stuff. I was obviously way into Legos as a kid, and my parents would always make sure that type of stuff was available. We would be playing Legos in the dressing room during in between tapings and things like that. I always had that off to the side. Of course, I would, they encouraged me to get into sports and, other types of things that, try to be as a regular kid as much as possible when we weren't doing the show. I didn't, do a bunch of other acting jobs while during Home Improvement, not a bunch of other movies and things like that. So normally when we weren't on the set, I would be at least somewhat leading a normal life.
Sure. You would go, actually, you weren't just chasing the next gig and being on this showbiz hamster wheel. You're actually checking in, checking out is what it seems like.
Yeah,
definitely. Which makes you, did you feel like, oh man, a lot of these other kids are just into show business. Like they are not interested in anything other than that next acting job or getting a movie or whatever that would be. But you had other things that had nothing to do with show business.
Yeah, I saw that a lot. I mean, we had a lot of guest stars coming of other kids on the show, and then, would interact with other actors in various ways. And that was oftentimes, and it wasn't necessarily the kid was feeling that, it was the parents that were pushing that.
Sure.
So that I always, as I got older and started to see that more in depth, it made me sad for some of those kids, especially because you just see it's like, oh, the parent is trying to live vicariously through you by making you a star in their image, and that kind of thing. So,
oh my God, and to be a kid and to have to worry about the idea of success and failure as a child.
Also, if you're supporting your family as a child, that's pretty.
There's so
scary.
many, but just that foundational concept when you're a kid, the idea of letting your processing show business's ups and downs as disappointing your family that's just, kids are not built to properly process. Adults can barely process it.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange form of child abuse, in at least it can be. And that's unfortunately, that's why a lot of the kids don't make it out of it. And, there's kids that I were contemporary with that ended up going on to ODing or even killing themselves and things like that. Because, especially once whatever they're defining themselves as or what project they're on dries up, and then they try to make that transition to adult acting, and it's very rare. Like most times kid actors don't end up becoming adult actors, even though they try, and then they're left with nothing, when that doesn't pan out. And,
when your identity is stripped away.
Exactly. So it can be, I definitely wouldn't put my own kids, if I had them, into it, just because, first of all, you're winning. It's like a lottery to actually get something big. And then it's another lottery to win to not be messed up by it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You got to get real lucky.
Yeah. So how did your relationship with the two other boys change from season 1 to the end?
Well, in the beginning, they oftentimes were just teasing me or just what older kids do to a younger brother or a younger kid. As the show went on, Jonathan kind of pulled back a lot from us and from the show entirely. I mean, actually, the last season totally left.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he didn't do the last season at all.
Oh, okay.
What was the justification on the show for that?
They said he was doing some sort of work study thing in Costa Rica or something like that.
Yeah. I always remember on Happy Days when Ron Howard stopped doing it, it'd be like the phone, they'd pick up hey, it's Richie's on the phone. Be like, what's that, Richie? Okay, Richie just called. It's like he's directing a movie somewhere.
I remember Tim was a bit upset because they said that he wanted to leave the show so he could go to college, and then he went and did one more movie. instead. And Tim was a little upset by that because he felt a little betrayed. But I think they've patched it up. I know actually Tim has had Jonathan on his old show, Last Man Standing, a couple times. So I'm sure they're fine now. But so, yeah, as that started happening, Zach and I became more close, but we were so different. I mean, it was like if we were just kids in a school, we never would have been friends.
Yeah, that's that strange forced family.
Like,
it's like
kind of like having a brother.
brothers.
Yeah, exactly. But a brother from a completely different family. So, yeah. He always seemed like he had a good heart underneath some of his strange behaviors. But, now he's, if you don't know, he's had a lot of trouble over the last few years with getting multiple DUIs and multiple domestic violence charges. So I have not seen him since any of that has come out, and I don't want to. Yeah.
So what was a standard week like for you on the show, like Monday to Friday, or including the weekend? Well, what would that be like during production?
We'd start out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would just be rehearsals, and they'd be changing the script from day to day.
So did you start Monday with a script?
Yeah, they would give us the script like the Friday before.
Okay,
and then so we'd have the weekend to read it and work on it a little bit. But you didn't, memorizing something that's going to be completely different by Friday wasn't too. You didn't have to do too much there. So yeah, we'd come in, we'd do a table read. Oftentimes we wouldn't do any rehearsal because they'd have to rewrite so much. But we would have to do our 3 hours of school. And then, we start rehearsing Tuesday. On Wednesday, we would do a rehearsal with an audience, a sample audience, but still no cameras or, wardrobe or special effects or anything like that. Thursday, they would bring in the camera and sound people and still rehearse. We would do like a run through with wardrobe and most things that on Thursday night. Friday, we'd come in later. We would do every scene maybe 2 to 3 times without an audience, but in full, taping mode. And then break for dinner. They'd bring in the audience of like 200-300 people. And then we would do a run through for them. And we would try to use that take because usually that was the best.
There were 200 or 300 people in the audience?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big audience.
Yeah, they had a separate one that was the Tool Time audience, and they would ask people if they wanted to be on camera, they could be in there, but it had bench seats were much more uncomfortable.
Right.
Sure. But yeah, there was a main audience that you'd never see that was, about 250 people,
like on bleachers, kind of behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And what was it like to keep the energy up and to have to pretend that this is the first time you're doing these things over the course of a week? Because look, everything's different for a kid. Everything, like a kid just saying like, hey, you need to do this 60 times, but on the 60th time, it's like you didn't do it the other 59 times. Like, how did you navigate that?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of part of the thing of you got to try to make each one, feel original. Don't, try to recreate it each time. I would say that final night with the audience, just having them there gives you energy.
Okay.
Tim especially would really come on, and get a lot of, a big boost from the audience, and he would ad lib a lot with them there, and you just kind of have to stay on your toes. You have to, like, all of a sudden he'd say something that made your line not mean anything. Sometimes you'd have to ad lib right back
because he's like got a stand-up background.
Exactly.
So it's like obviously like an audience is going to make him come alive.
Yeah, and stuff would just pop into his head, and but that was great. That was some of the best jokes were those. But I remember, like, we would do a rap party afterward, but still I would be up till like 2 a.m. just because of the energy you get from the live audience.
Wow.
That's
and that's every week.
Audience rush. Yeah. So we would, we only did 25 weeks out of the year, so it wasn't the whole time. But then, oftentimes we would do some sort of event in a different city over the weekend, and there was times where we went right from a taping to the airport, red eye, to like some random city in Ohio and then do like an autograph signing on Saturday or Sunday or some sort of like charity event someplace, and then try to fly right back and start all over again on Monday.
What's
Wow.
what's one of the weirdest events you had to go to?
Oh my! I mean, there was some really fun, wild ones. Like went to Washington D.C. at one point, and I got to give a talk on the White House lawn and meet the Clintons and
Wow.
get a whole tour of all around the Capitol and stuff like that. They had us like doing some riverside cleanup. I remember picking up needles on the Potomac or whatever the river is in Washington D.C.
Wow.
for some reason. But oftentimes it would just be like an autograph signing in a mall. I remember one in Pennsylvania, and didn't realize that we were like in like some pretty serious Amish country, and they had an escalator in there, and I was like playing on the escalator as kids do, like pushing myself up, and some guy just snapped at me and was just, some stranger was telling me about how this thing has a 60-horse motor that will just eat me right up and all this. And then we find out this is the first escalator in the whole county that has just been installed. And I was like, dude, it's an escalator. But yeah, just I'd been to like so many just, mid to large towns all around the country, especially once they did, after the fourth year, they syndicated the show, and the Disney pushed, tried to do as much press and events to promote the syndication. So it was a lot of, weekend travels or, other things in those breaks. So that's why I was like barely at my regular school.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever hang out with people from the other shows?
Yeah, eventually we
Because which lot were you shooting on?
we were on the Disney lot.
You're shooting on the
in
Disney
Burbank.
lot. Yeah.
We were the first like sitcom on that lot, but then they brought in more afterwards. So Boy Meets World was shot there. So all the those kids would come and play in our basketball court that we fought to get. Because when we got there was absolutely no place for kids to play. And when we would go on the grass, like the Mickey Mouse police, aka the security, would come and like tell us to get off the grass. They eventually, on season 2, they wheeled in a basketball hoop that was weighed down with cinder blocks, and they put it in between the sound stages where the trucks go, and they're like, okay, play here. And then, a week later, they're like, we're getting a lot of complaints from the truck drivers that the kids are in the way. Like, yeah, put it in the road. So third season is when we actually did some renegotiation of our contract. And a lot of it was about getting a safe place to play, because they were really recalcitrant about providing that. And Zach's dad had been a contractor before, and when they were telling him there was no place for anything, he just went out with a chalk line and drew it out in the parking lot and was like, here's your spot.
Oh, that's nice.
So they eventually put a fence around and gave us a little basketball hoop, and then it had like a recreation trailer with like a ping pong table and stuff like that.
Cool.
But because you have these kids on all day long, and no way for them to like blow off any steam, and of course they're gonna act up on the set, and if they're not getting some exercise. So we kind of paved the way for some of the other shows with kids to
So the Boy Meets World kids would come and play, and then what other kids were just coming in and out that you remember?
I remember Margaret Cho had her show on there, This American Girl, I believe. So that had Ashley Johnson, who was my age. She was originally, I think, on Growing Pains, but she was on that. We became friends. That also had Betty White on there, so it was great to meet Betty White. Then the original creators of our show did a few others, including Buddies, which was Dave Chappelle's first show.
Okay.
So they actually kind of spun off Dave Chappelle. They had him and Jim Brewer, I believe, is the other guy, start in the Tool Time audience and be incorporated into the show as like, being pulled out of the audience and talk about their girlfriends or something. And then they kind of spun it off and they made a one season of Buddies.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave Chappelle used to come, since we had been established for a while. We had a much better craft service, so they would come over to our craft service and hang out. But that show didn't work very well, and eventually he went to he got the Chappelle Show, which was much bigger, much better fit.
Mm-hmm.
We also had Haley Joel Osment was on a little show before he did The Sixth Sense with Ed Asner. I'm trying to remember what that was called, but so yeah, there was a few that came through. Mostly, I would see the other celebrity kids doing like events, either charity events or like ABC would throw a party every year for everybody on all the ABC shows. And so I remember meeting the Olsen twins when they were 4 years old. And their mom explaining that, oh, sorry, they're cranky tonight. They're tired. They're cranky. Yeah, actually, that's how I ended up on Bill Maher's show, because they had Bill Maher come from Comedy Central to ABC with Politically Incorrect. So he showed up at an ABC party, and I went up and talked to him, and because I actually liked his show, Politically Incorrect, and he ended up inviting me onto it.
And how old were you at this point?
I think 12 or 13. I was there. Yeah, I was the only kid to ever be on that show.
What were the issues? Do you remember what issues you talked about?
It was during the Al Gore v. Bush election cycle. It was before, it wasn't like during the fight over it. It was the lead up to it. So we talked about Al Gore, and we talked about, I think there was like some topical thing about a kid catching a baseball, and I don't know, something silly in the 90s. But yeah, it was just a strange little experience. But I remember I had to do a bunch of pre-interviews with the producers, because they were like, no, we're not bringing a kid on the show. I had to try to convince them, because Bill Maher was like, yeah, come on in.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Was there did you feel the network of child actors that you were in? Like, did it feel like there's like a little society of parents and kids kind of navigating this weird world? Somewhat. I mean, there definitely some of my parents became friends with some of the other kids' parents. I remember Brighton McClure, the youngest kid on the on Family Matters, the Urkel show.
It
wasn't originally the Urkel show. They became really good friends. We did a lot of stuff with they were involved with RAD, as in Recording Artists Against Drunk Driving, which then expanded to RAD, Recording Artists, Athletes, and Actors Against Drunk Driving. Okay.
Just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got 5 A's.
So we did a lot of events and stuff with them on that. And so, we'd hear stories about other sets and things, and hard, difficult stars to work with and things like that.
Did you ever hang out with Urkel?
I met him a few times. He apparently was not very nice to Brighton McClure, and would tell him that the lines had changed when they had in, and do kind of
hazing kind of shit.
Just kind of mean stuff to him. Yeah, I mean, he really took over that show. It's kind of
I know, it was more like a family.
Yeah, he was just a guest star.
Yeah,
so. That is the strangest thing. The idea that it was it's this family sitcom, and then just this kid blows up, and then everybody's just there to hold this kid's water while he's got a robot and he's got a evil twin.
Stefan or Cal.
Yeah. And it's so weird. The whole character, everything. It definitely, it was very, from what we heard from them, it was a very strange experience to just have it be co-opted like that. But
that character really stressed me out when I was a kid.
Didn't like it
because he would come in and he would fuck everything up, and then I'd be like, who's gonna clean up this mess? Then he would just leave.
Drove me nuts. And anything like that would just be like, this isn't funny.
He's knocking over everything in the room. It's like, what are you doing?
You just messed the kitchen up. I just these suds are everywhere pouring out of the washing machine. Who's gonna get
You've
a mop
moved
in
everything
here?
from its correct place.
And any normal parent would be like, no, that kid can't come over anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just like,
we got to start locking the door.
Yeah, exactly. Need a shop vac now because the carpet's ruined.
What was your relationship like with Tim Allen?
It was good. It's funny. He's actually, he always seemed a little shy on one-on-one when you're, but as soon as there was a group, he'd come on. But he was always great. I mean, keeping us laughing during the rehearsals with stuff that they could never show on TV at that time. It was always really fun. So, and him, being careful not to become too powerful or be too much of a tyrant was always very nice, because
that's interesting.
We'd hear other stories of sitcoms and stuff where that type of stuff was happening. So it was always a very like easy set to be on with him, especially. I mean, it was a funny thing though, like they started the show with him as, from his comedy act, not realizing that he actually had written his first comedy act in jail.
Oh, okay.
And didn't do the full vetting process. That was all before the internet anyway. So once the show was going and it was going to come out that he had spent time in jail for dealing coke, he right before it came out, he got everybody on the set and like explained it to him. I can remember the scene there, but I'm not really understanding what it meant at 7 years old, knowing what a coke dealer was. But
right.
I was like, oh, okay. Right. But he, the judge apparently like saw something in him and was like, told him that like you have a lot of potential. You're wasting it doing this. And like, he's probably one of the maybe like 5 people in history that was benefited by going to jail for a little while.
Wow.
I said he wrote his first comedy act there. It was sort of, he said he was a bit of a defense mechanism, and like no one wanted to mess up with the funny guy, like he could kind of go amongst the different crowds there, and
because he was entertaining.
Exactly. It was a self-defense
the court
mechanism.
jester.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just a constant deflection.
That is funny.
With jokes.
Yeah. Who were you closest to on the set, like adult or kid or?
Well, Earl Hindman, the guy who played the Wilson, the neighbor, was always so sweet.
I had a T-shirt with Wilson on it.
Nice. He was definitely the most professional actor on the there, and he was so sweet. We loved him dearly. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple years after the show ended. But he was much older than everybody there. So he was great. Mostly it was the crew members, like our craft service guy, Joe, took a big interest in raising us. I mean, what's funny is like I saw, this never came up during the show, but as an adult looking back, I realized I kind of inadvertently got the experience of being raised by a village, going, spending almost all day long with this, group of starting with like 20, 25 adults during the beginning of the week, all the way up to about like 200 by the end. And, all of them taking at least some interest in my life and teaching me stuff. I learned to play chess from the grips on the show. Always try to take an interest in what, learning what their trade was. Oftentimes getting in trouble because, like, union rules, you're not allowed to do someone else's job for them, even though I'm trying to be helpful. Of course, no one wanted to be someone who's like, oh, I get hurt because someone allowed me to try to do something,
exactly. Yeah, a giant sandbag fell on your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's only 2 brothers now on the
show. Hey, stuff happens.
Oh, yeah, he's in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Who, of all the guest stars over the course of the thing, who was someone you were super excited to meet?
I always loved Janine Garofalo, watching her on Comedy Central and on other like Ben Stiller's show and stuff like that. And then she ended up coming on. We had Jimmy Carter was a big part of it. I got to go volunteer with Habitat for Humanity and do a little bit of work with him. But who I became friends with was a guy named Kalen Romero, who played my Gothic friend on the show, Ronnie. And so when they made me go Gothic, they brought in the ultra goth scary kid, and we've stayed friends to this day.
That's really
very,
cool.
very close friends.
Yeah, let's get into it, man.
I think it might be time to
tell
ask
us about this goth storyline. How did this occur?
Which season was this again? Season 7.
So second to last.
Okay, so
whose idea was this?
So it wasn't mine. With season 6, like I said, they the whole storyline of the older brothers beating up on me or teasing me didn't really work anymore because now I was taller than both of them, and just we'd all grown up. So they were kind of floundering. You just don't my characters didn't really have anything going for it. So I actually had a meeting with Tim near the end of that season, pitching some ideas. We thought maybe Mark could go new age, which would be funny.
Ooh, that would have been great.
And
Yeah, what were some other ideas?
I can't remember. That was the one that stuck with me. But they decided a Midwestern kid wouldn't do that, and then over the break between season 6 and season 7, the decision was made to make me gothic. And I found out later the head writer on the show, who sort of took over it by that time, and it was like one of those. We heard from the other writers that like if they had an idea, they had to like get him to have the idea so that it would actually happen, just if it was his idea. He had a son that was right around my age, and after about halfway through the season, I remember I'm in wardrobe, got like black fingernails and dog collar and all this stuff on, and I went backstage and came face to face with his son, who was not in wardrobe but looked just like me. And we had this very awkward moment of like, oh, I'm your dad's way of kind of dealing with you here. I don't know. Like, sorry.
So when you first heard about this, were you just like, what is goth? Did you have any?
No, I knew a little bit of it. I definitely wasn't my thing. I never went through my own gothic phase, but I was old enough to understand like, of the look a little bit. I mean, what's funny is like, the goth they made me was the middle-aged wardrobe woman's idea of what goth was at that time. Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, it's funny because it didn't go well with the fan base, who were primarily, Christian families and things like that. And I started getting all this, mail from people wanting to save my soul because they thought this was me and were worried about me going to hell by being gothic and all this kind of stuff. So that's why between season 7 and season 8, they just got rid of it. And when I came back, season 8, I was just back to normal. No mention. Like,
really?
Just he's dressing normal again.
Just a fad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Which is sort of
I guess that's pretty realistic.
Yeah. But
it's like summer vacation happens and all of a sudden a kid just dresses completely differently and no one ever says anything about it.
What was it like? Because you were in a band at a point too.
Yeah, they had you play the tambourine. That was so weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was sort of actually...
Because it was like a rock band, like rock kids. And
they were just... This was their... At this point, there was a lot of that, like, just go for the joke kind of thing. So it was like, this was a silly thing that Mark could do that undermined his gothicness, was that he was on a,
Oh, so that was part of the joke.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you were a bad goth.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. Because when you like watching it now, it just seems like they're confused about what goth is.
Well, there's that too.
There's so many layers to this.
That too. That was actually a little bit of art imitating life because Kaylin, the kid who played Ronnie, we actually started a band as a kid. We were in a couple different bands over the years.
Did you play tambourine?
No. I played drums and then bass later.
Cool.
But Kaylin is extremely musical. He can play everything.
He's funny. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he didn't talk a lot.
No, it was all like one line.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, but the parents were like kind of scared of him. Or,
exactly. Yeah. And they really, did the full makeup, full, spike collar, all that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So. And when you're starting off at 7 on this, and you were 15 when it ended, 16?
15, yeah.
15. What's it like to just grow up on a show like that? Like you're going through the stuff that kids go through, but there's a camera aimed at you. Like what's it like suddenly?
Audience members?
What's it like to suddenly you're sprouting up past your 2 older brothers and you're going from being like a little kid into being like a teenager?
Yeah, I mean it's a strange thing that you don't see too often because shows with kids don't. They don't always go that long, but you always, if they're not animated, you see they grow up and all of a sudden things don't make sense anymore. It is, I mean, there was always like a bit obviously separation between what the character is doing and what I'm doing, but it definitely led to some strangeness. I mean, I did a shoot a small movie when I was, 11 or so. And it was funny because it was right after we were done shooting that my voice changed from puberty. And then we had to go back and do ADR.
Okay.
And my voice did not match at all. And the director is like, can you do it higher? A little higher. Yeah. Higher, please.
Nice.
So, that's just sort of dealing with kids on that long-term basis, is part of it. But yeah, it was it's hard to like describe in any single sense, just because it is just, it was my whole life during that time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things going on, and I didn't really know any different.
It all seems pretty normal to you.
Sort of. I mean, we definitely knew this wasn't normal,
right?
But it's still, it's just the sea I swam in at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever do any like photo shoots for like Bop magazine?
Oh yeah.
Or YM? Really? Okay,
Yeah.
Can you please describe what a photo shoot is like? Is it like a weird guy shooting photos? Is it like
sure? Or yeah, mostly a guy.
What are they?
No.
So my parents were they didn't push for that type of stuff, but there was we were expected to do a certain amount of it, as contractually, basically.
It's written in your contract. You have to be a teen heartthrob, at least try.
In so many words, yeah. Whereas like, Jonathan's mom pushed for that.
Sure.
From the beginning, really, really, push that hard, and for better or for worse. It was weird. We would go to most of them were all in the same building, actually, in New York.
Okay.
So we would just go and like spend a whole day going floor to floor doing random ass photo shoots.
Do they have the clothes there, or do you bring your personal clothes?
No, they had clothes there, and usually we get to keep the clothes at the end.
Oh, that's nice.
Which was, it was kind of fun.
And so, are they giving what kind of direction are they giving these kids?
I mean, it's weird because it's like you look back at that stuff. It's like, is this sort of like softcore porn?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
It's like Fame when he's taking the pictures of.
I mean, all this depends on
Come on, you want to be famous, right?
yeah.
God.
I can't really think. It's all a bit of a blur now as far as like any individual photo shoot. I mean, I remember there was some weird ones with that we had to do for Home Improvement. I remember there was like a Christmas one, and they dropped all this snow on us, but the snow is like shaved pieces of plastic, so it all gets down into your. I still see that picture every once in a while, and I just remember, oh god, that sucks so much. It's just again, it was just sort of what I did, so I didn't feel too weird about it. And luckily, I never had any strange experiences with the photo shoots. The weirder stuff comes from doing morning talk radio. Oftentimes I'd get up real early and call in to some East Coast shock jock and then just have to like bat down their stupid questions of like, did I ever like pop a boner working with Pamela Anderson?
What? And you're like 12 or something? Oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah, it was pretty gross.
Cross that question off the list.
Yes, totally. I did every day.
I was
too young for that.
What on earth? What a horrendous thing to ask a child.
The funny one was, my sister was a lot older, and there was a time when my parents went out of town. They left me with her, and she took me to one of her like college parties, and the college kids got me drunk there. And then I was supposed to wake up.
Point?
I'm not going to say.
Okay. All right.
Legally.
And I was unresponsive the next morning. Like I was, she couldn't she was doing this, and she couldn't get me up.
Gosh. And you had to do a radio show?
Yeah. So she called in, and she was just going to tell them that I had food poisoning, which was sort of true.
Yeah.
And they didn't want the dead air, so they put her on.
Okay.
And started making jokes. Oh, did Tim Allen make the food and all this stuff? And she, by that time, was totally done with acting. She was mortified by this type of thing. But, but she let the thing happen. So,
oh man,
yeah,
that's so funny. Did your parents care about that afterwards?
They only knew about that much later.
Okay,
so it was water under the bridge.
Gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Now, you were doing this. What was your relationship to acting throughout all this in terms of thinking about this going beyond this show? Did you have a feeling like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, and I don't know if this is who I want to be, or were you just not sure yet, or where were you at with that?
Actually, through most of it, I thought, like most actors, that I would become a director.
Okay.
And so that's why I ended up going to USC, got into their film school, and did about one semester there before I ended up running away from home and leaving USC, because I didn't fit in the culture there at all. And then also was like, this was right around 2000, 2001. So I was starting to, I was going there and realizing I've been doing this for all these years. I already know what I'm learning here so far. And the whole idea that like you go to a film school to kind of get in with the like old boys club of the film studios didn't really mean much to me, and also was changing because of like digital production was, getting the shoots and stuff were out of their hands into more independent stuff. So I felt like I needed to, didn't want to do it at that point. But yeah, I the whole time I thought I was going to continue on both acting and directing and stay in that for a long time. It wasn't until after the show ended that I ended up totally going in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm. Who did you want to be? Who would have been like what movies were you into, and what stuff were you into at that point?
Definitely loved Terry Gilliam at that time.
Okay.
Like his more his type of stuff of just or wild and whimsical, that type of stuff. It was very quickly after the show ended though that I ended up going in a completely different direction, and realizing about myself that I really like to build stuff, like do things with my hands, with tools, and have something at the end of the day to point to, be like, I made that. And which you don't really get as an actor very, very much. I mean, it's very far removed. Eventually, you'll see something on the screen, but it's as an actor, it's hard to really even feel like it's your art. Like I always think if a film or a TV show is like a painting, the actors are the paint. The painter is the director, writer, producer combo for the most part. You can shine as much as you want as your own color as the paint, but you're still just, one tool in the artist's toolbox there. Whereas, when I'm working and building something, I feel like it is, something I've created. So,
do you think that largely comes from your father instilling you with a love of tools, or is it from tool time?
Well, people always ask, like, "Oh, do you learn or get that from tool time?" I was like, "Well, I learned what not to do from tool time because there was always a lesson there."
That's true.
So yeah, I learned what to do from my dad for the most part, and what not to do from tool time. But yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, that all was that started, from day one of being his son and watching him build a plane and doing so much stuff like that. So I think it was far more like who I am underneath all that. So
was the show fun up until the end doing it, or did you kind of did it stop being fun at a certain point?
No, the show was always fun. It was my parents were very good about like at any time, contract or no, I could have just said, I'm done. And they would have pulled me from that and, let the chips fall where they may. So I always had that out, and I never, ever thought about using it during the show. It was really overall a fun experience. Like, I don't resent it in any way. In fact, I'm so thankful because it still, follows me to this day to help enable me to do the fun things I've been able to do over these years. But it was definitely, once it was ended, it was, there was this like, I was actually really excited. Like some of the other people were, super sad about the show ending. For me, it was just like, okay, that chapter's over. Now I can go anywhere.
Like 15, it's like the world's your oyster.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So
how the hell did you end up at SpaceX?
A long winding road through submarines and through other things. So originally, what happened after the show, I ended up meeting a woman that was much older than me, forming a relationship with her. My parents found out how old she was, told me I couldn't see her. I said, well, you can't tell me that. And I ran away. I moved to Hawaii for a while with her. And then when I turned 18, came back to LA, the house that they had used my money to buy was legally mine at 18. Like they couldn't, they had got, my parents had gotten court approval to use my funds to buy it, but that had to be turned over at 18. So I came back to LA and first ended up starting a business with my then partner called Play Food, which was we had a restaurant space, actually right down the street from here on Ventura Boulevard, and a catering truck. And it was the first vegan catering truck, I believe, in existence. And we had a manufacturing side making cashew-based cheeses, vegan cheeses. It was the first like non-soy cheese on the market at that point.
That's so
So
cool.
I did that for a few years, tried to end the romantic side of the relationship with my partner and keep the business side. She wasn't having that. And we ended up fighting in court for 2.5 years over the business. She filed for divorce, even though we weren't legally married. I took 2.5 years just to get in front of a judge to be like, there's no marriage certificate.
And there was no certificate because of the age gap?
So it's a little complicated. When I was when I was still a teenage runaway, we ended up sort of using a archaic law in Kansas that allowed a common law marriage between as young as a 12-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl. And to be common law married, you just had to live together and hold yourself out to the public as being married. So we got a common law marriage in Kansas just to be able to come back to California, which would, even though they didn't have that law, they respected other states' marriage laws. So that made me emancipated by operation of law here in California.
Interesting.
But then, once it got in the press that I did that, the Kansas state legislator met and changed the law and made it retroactive because they didn't want Kansas to become a mecca for pedophiles.
Right. Pretty good move.
Yeah. So they
Kansas.
retroactively annulled the marriage at that point.
Okay.
And by that time I was 18, so it didn't really matter. So we continued on our relationship as an unmarried couple. But then when the things started going bad with the business, she just filed for divorce and said that we were married and just, told her original lawyer that, and then continued on with 5 different lawyers. Each one, they had realized that they had been lied to. They'd drop her. She'd get a new one that would work on contingency and drag it on. And yeah, it took 2.5 years. Meanwhile, the business, I was having to try to keep the business afloat while I had a partner that was antagonistic and not able to accept any investment because of that. And we kind of just hit this like ceiling where we had all these orders for the cheeses, but we couldn't fulfill them because the money was being spent on lawyers and we couldn't get any. So eventually I just said, all right, this is going to go on forever. She's going to continue getting more lawyers involved, and I'm having to pay for all this. So I gave all the equipment to charity and just backed out of it. And then went on to start doing installation art at festivals and museums all around.
Yeah, you're a Burning Man guy.
Yeah, eventually went to Burning Man around that time for the first time, 2005, and started really getting into making large-scale art at Coachella and at Light in a Bottle, a few other ones around here, and then did a tour of festivals in Europe in like 2010. And through that, there's a lot of overlap actually in the building of a festival and the building of a refugee camp. A lot of the same, problems have to be addressed there. The only difference is like people are excited to be at a festival and there's fun and art there.
Less so excited. At
So, but because of that overlap, I ended up working a lot in disaster relief. I went to the Philippines after they had a typhoon that devastated a city about the size of Santa Monica. It was like 2 stories of ocean water across the whole city. Spent 6 months there to help rebuild, and did similar things in Texas and a few other spots around the world, and really got into I was working with an organization called Communitaire, which their whole thing was to build maker spaces or bid shops. The maker space is in here in America, it's like a gym that you can be a membership and you get access to tools, everything from simple tools to CNC machines and 3D printers and whatever it is to make. So in a post-disaster area, it can be a real big resource to, instead of coming and be like, okay, we will rebuild this for you and have it be something that's totally useless for the actual people because it's some foreigner's idea of what is right. Just bringing the tools, setting up the space, and be like, okay, do what you need to, whatever you need to do, we'll help you. So I had the I had the title Makerspace Maker. That was my role, was to actually build out that whole facility. So done that a lot. Worked in various different ways of either building art or like working with my dad building desalination machines, such as he went on to design some more rugged systems for the military. So for a little while I was a military contractor. Felt strange. But eventually, through my love of sailing and living on a boat for a long time, and going back to San Francisco and becoming a part of a community of people up there that live on their boats and will bring their boats to the same location and tie them up and throw parties, and eventually created stuff that's kind of like Burning Man on the water. Through that, ended up getting involved in submarines.
Okay.
Of course.
Because
as one does.
One of my good friends who was taught me how to scuba dive. She's a marine biologist, and just sort of on a whim, ended up acquiring a small submarine, a home built sub that was made in Michigan, bringing it out to San Francisco. And because of my ability from home improvement still giving me residuals, I was able to take time off, not have to make money, but I was able to get really deep into submarines. Originally with that one, and then we ended up acquiring a bigger one that was an ex-Swedish naval sub, still a two-person submarine, but like a diesel electric, like 32 foot long.
And where do you get a sub? You just go on Craigslist? Or?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we got the first one on Craigslist, and then once we got that, once we started playing with that one, it's more of a toy, but it will go down like 50, 60 feet just fine and move around. It's got little thrusters and just runs off. It's got all the basics of a submarine. It's a good trainer. But once we did that, of course, everyone in the community kept throwing ads that they'd find for other subs. And we saw this one that had been designed for the Swedish Navy, had been passed around a little bit. The Sea Shepherd Institute had it for a little while. They're the ones that are out there trying to, stop whaling. I don't know, they had a show called Whale Wars. They never actually used it because they weren't really qualified. They're mostly a volunteer organization, but they painted it to look like an orca. But yeah, it got into like a three-way partnership between me, that the woman Shani, who was a marine biologist, and someone I had worked with in Berkeley, who has a company called All Power Labs, which eventually ended up working as an engineer for them for a while. They build generators that run off of power generators that run off of wood chips or walnut shells or like any type of agricultural waste that burns well. They can turn that into power. So the three of us had started an organization called the Community Submersible Project, with the intention of trying to give people access to the under the sea, basically, and create the first submarine pilot school, because that does not exist. Kind of trying to model it after the Hang Gliding Association, which is a private organization that other that hang gliding sites and hang gliding wing manufacturers use to if you're certified through them, then they'll sell you a wing, or they'll let you fly at a certain place. We were trying to create something like that for submarines, but unfortunately things kind of got derailed from COVID, and I was sort of left kind of by myself with submarines, and not a bunch of money to work with them. And so that's
just a lonely guy in his submarines.
Yeah, kind of. But yeah, because one partner had to focus on his business, and the other partner kind of got torn away by a third submarine, and now I was working on other things. So that's when I kind of leveraged that experience of working on subs to apply and start working at SpaceX. Originally was in production, building the second stage part of the Falcon 9, which is the expendable part. So we had to build one for every launch, and we eventually got down to building them a new one every 2.5 days. And then an opportunity opened up into a different department, the West Coast Recovery, where based out of Long Beach, we actually go out on ships to see and catch the rockets when they land on the drone ship. Of course, I Still Love You. It's the name of the drone ship. So that's why the joke about me being a space marine is sort of true. Not hurting anybody, but no, we got to see on one ship and follow the autonomous vehicle, the drone ship. Once it lands, we use a rope swing and swing over. And,
use a rope swing?
Yeah, I had to go through swing rope training it's swing rope because that sounds more adult, right, than a rope swing. But I had to get certified to swing from one boat to the other, pirate style, and then we would do certain things to safe the rocket and get it ready to be transported back to Long Beach, and then we'd work on the dock too to get it all set up to go back to the launch pad in Vandenberg. That's like the West Coast launch. So they have the same team on the East Coast it's much bigger because they launch twice as much out there. They have 2 more drone ships and the whole thing. So it's it's really exciting. I mean, it was a great way to leverage my experience of sailing and submarines and all whole life working with the ocean, and still work in the space industry. So it was really fun, and we get to actually be out there within a few miles to see the rockets land is quite amazing.
That's really cool.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, it's like what a crazy journey. So many different chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and who knows what's next?
Yeah, really.
I would not bet on what would be next because it's not exactly following a straight line.
Yeah.
I know you're a remarkably well-balanced person for having been a child star, especially starting at 6 months old.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, my parents were really good about always trying to keep some sort of normalcy, outside of the business throughout the whole thing. And I really thank them for it. I got very lucky because, it wasn't their big goal either. It wasn't, they were never like that typical stage parents where they're just pushing for some, big fame thing. It was always just like a hobby that kind of got out of hand.
How did it change? How did working on the show change your relationship to the idea of work?
Well, I'd like to think that it gave me a good work ethic. I mean, I do remember as a kid thinking, oh, wow. I mean, especially there was a time where I was very sick during a taping, like stomach flu type thing. And, there was this time of like, I still got to do this. Like there's millions of dollars and all these people's livelihoods are all, coming to this point where like I can't just back out. And I would, would do a take and immediately run to the trash can and throw up with the audience watching.
Oh my God. Would they react to that?
Sure. Yeah. I try to keep it, subtle, but,
God, I'd love to be at that tape.
Yeah. But, there was this, it did, instill in me that like, okay, you're part of this thing that's much bigger than you. And you gotta like, no matter, the show must go on one way or another. And you got to put in the time. And I've always tried to, I've always enjoyed being part of some team like that. Like it's it's always way more fun, and you could do so much more when you're part of a large team, and that is able to do so much more than any sum of its parts, or any individual of it in there. So, I mean, definitely feels like that at SpaceX for sure.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So it's fair to say the Taran outgrew Home Improvement.
Yeah, by a lot. Yeah.
So you never felt the acting bug ever again, really. It just never. It felt like you did that, and that chapter closed. What's the next chapter?
Yeah, I definitely don't ever have the desire to act, as in play someone I'm not. Like I don't mind that concept of like of being part of something that is promoting something cool and is, doing something good for the world. Like I did work a little bit with Daryl Hannah on she had her own show. Originally it was going to be on Discovery, but then they started putting all the stipulations on her and she pulled out and she just did it on herself. It was called Daryl Hannah's Love Life, DH Love Life. She filmed the first of the third episode at my house because we were doing like the underground restaurant at my house. And then I worked with her on a few other episodes. And that felt fun because it was for a good cause. We were promoting like various eco-friendly concepts,
Mhm.
and I wasn't really acting as in like playing some character that someone else is writing. I've enjoyed that type of thing, but never been like, oh, I really just want to, get back into it and do feature films or something like that.
Sure.
I've never been opposed to doing a reunion show, but it seems like it's never going to happen, especially with the way Zach is, and Patricia doesn't want to do it. And there was a long lawsuit between the original creators of the show and Disney that stretched on for years. That's why we weren't on any of the streaming services for a long time.
Oh.
Yeah, it's because Disney bought ABC in between like the second and third year, and then just basically sold the show to itself without any bidding process. And the producers, the creators of the show, were basically cut out of, potentially a lot more money if, say, NBC outbid them or something like that. So they sued, and then that went back and forth for like a few decades, really.
Man.
But yeah, now it's way too late. I don't think they're ever going to do a homeroom thing. I thought it would have been. I suggested at one point, instead of like doing a reunion where we are playing those characters again, just get the surviving cast members into a room or like into a big van and just like, tell stories while maybe going around picking up some of the guest stars and bringing them in.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And just be ourselves. But yeah, that never happened.
That'd be a blast. No, it's really nice that you've gotten involved in so many amazing causes since the show and have used the power you got from being on such a huge show to put good back into the world. And
Absolutely.
you're a real stand-up guy and you get shit done, and it's really cool.
Thank you. Well, my parents always pushed that of like, just from the very beginning of like, with fans to like, you have this gift that we're very lucky to have that can be shared in a way that helps people. So like, you got to pay that luck back.
Sure.
One way or another. But I've always tried to do, either with the celebrity thing or just because I had the time from not having to always having to work a job, because of residuals, being able to go and volunteer and do a lot, things like that. I've been very fortunate to be in that position. So I try not to waste it.
Yeah. When's the last time you watched a full episode of the show?
God, probably before the show ended. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
You haven't watched it since?
No.
You got to.
No, or not.
Yeah, I don't know. One of these days, maybe. But I stopped watching even while we were taping, just because it was like I lived it and I knew so it wasn't really any reason. And then I just never really got into it again.
Now there's TV shows I worked on that I never saw one episode of.
Oh, really?
So I know
my
what
gosh,
that's
yeah.
like.
So much of things I've done, I'm like, I have no. Once you do it. You lived it.
It's literally what you said. You live it. It's like I don't need to. It's like Pee Wee Herman. It's like at the end of Pee Wee's Big Adventure. It's like I don't need to watch the movie. I lived it.
Exactly.
No. Well, this has been amazing.
Yeah,
seriously.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
and we love you. You're great.
Yeah.
Oh, I love you too.
No, this is great, and just so excited about this journey and you sharing it with everybody is really special.
Yeah, and excited to see what comes next.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll have another episode real soon, and thanks for supporting the show, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.